podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Welcome to the NQAT Daily. Today, talking about 1 year since the takeover by INEOS, or partial takeover. I'm Ed with Wayne. How's it going? Happy anniversary.
Oh yeah, that anniversary. Yeah, thank you. Happy anniversary to you too. How are you? I was like, have we missed something? Have we been official for a long time or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
No. That anniversary, I'm tongues in cheek, of course. Happy Christmas as well.
Oh yeah, Merry Christmas. I will say this, very, very cheap plug, and it's not really a plug, but I'm on socials before we get into the meat of this very important podcast. On socials, I'm posting that if anyone is lonely, otherwise disposed, in need of any kind of distraction over the holiday period, I'm giving 2 copies of my books away on ebooks. So just message me on any platform. I'll send you the links for them. And it's nothing. It's really nothing. But I just want to make sure that it's there. People are aware of the offer if they want something to distract them. Because sometimes I would like a distraction. And we've got one today, Ed. Thank you very much for providing me with it. Thank you for not inviting me on to talk about the Bournemouth defeat. I've managed to avoid talking about that to anyone so far. And today we're talking the rosy future of Manchester United, right?
Oh, yes. Big Sir Jim and his very large wallet and shoe size. So, you know what I meant. A man with a big wallet says he can buy a football club. And it is 1 year since the sales agreement was published and the handshakes were shook. And Sir Jim bought about 25% of the club. He's obviously up to that through 2 additional equity purchases since then. One also agreed yesterday, a couple of days ago, no surprise, because he said in the sales agreement that he would contribute an extra $100 million, £79 million. So anyway,
everyone seems surprised by that.
It's really odd. Yeah. It said in the agreement it was going to happen, and it happened. I mean, I guess it made a lot of headlines and generated some clicks for the cynical amongst you. So,
exactly.
Yeah, it was a very, if you remember, tortuously long process to get there. So I spent last summer, so 18 months ago, talking to various people around the takeover, either about state ownership because of the Qatari bid or human rights issues. I even talked to a environmental company that is suing INEOS just to get a sense and a flavour of everything. So help me really understand who INEOS are as a company and what they're about, whatever you think of their practices and products. So they make plastic pellets, basically. I mean, a bunch of other stuff, but that's their core business. So they refine oil, and in some cases help government extract it, mostly refining and production into these plastic pellets, which go on to make other things like, I don't know, anything you use plastic in, bottles and pipes and so on and so on and so on. It's a massive company. So
the little things that attach the lids to the bottles, which are the chagrin of everybody these days.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're an environmentalist, it's one of the most polluting companies on the planet. But he has a particular and very successful business model, which is to buy up assets of other companies which look distressed in some fashion or underperforming, and he puts them together like a bit of a conglomerate in order to increase market share, and it generates 60 billion euros of revenue per year, something like that. And it's this network of companies with a overarching group, and it's effectively private, although there are parts of it that are public as well, so that helped with getting some of the information. And it's effectively owned by Sir Jim and his 2 partners and a few other shareholders, but they control an awful lot of capital there. So he's fucking rich. It's a short version of saying that.
He's not giving any books away on podcasts on Christmas Eve, I'll tell you that. He's not giving anything away.
Is he working the soup kitchens? So
well, I don't think there's
Seems
a lot
unlikely.
not a lot of goodwill around Old Trafford at the moment. And we'll be
No.
talking about that. But it's interesting. You've said like you've been talking about him for like 18 months, and really the process. I remember he was first hailed as a saviour when he first came out. I think it might have been Ducker who broke it. It was 2.5 years ago. It was the summer. It was just before we signed Casemiro and Anthony, before everything started to... Because I think that there was like 2 weeks of thinking, oh God, the future looks rosy. And we were talking. I was saying, look, we're spending money we don't have at this moment in time. We're kicking
Literally,
back. That can was going right down the road. And then people were like, you get excited about stuff like that. But yeah, it's been a long time coming. He was deemed as the saviour beforehand. It was very protracted to actually get to the point where he got a partial stake in it. And for a long time, it did feel like it was not going to happen. And then it did a year ago.
Yeah, extremely long strategic review, which was code for the Glazers going, we've run out of money. And they literally had. I mean, United have been bankrolling the expenditures in the last 3 years through extending loans. And so currently owe £331 million in transfer fees. I'd go check that one up again because I've quoted a few different numbers. 331 million in transfer fees and 537 million net in senior secured loans. They are due next year and in 2027. So anyway, it basically paints a whatever the opposite of a rosy picture is. Bleak financial picture.
Word.
Bleak financial picture. United were in trouble. The Glazers were in trouble. The business model was no longer stacking up. Too many management failures. Lots of resources deployed in the wrong areas, and it was causing problems. And not quite in the way that the Glazers. I mean, if you remember back when the PIK loans, payment in kind loans, were taken out as part of their leverage buyout, they were rolling at 14 and something % per year, and United in the first couple of years after the takeover were making about £100 million in interest payments a year, which is quite eye-watering. And many of us were worried that the future might not exist for the club. It was so bad. It was so risky. Obviously didn't come to pass. Huge inflation in the broadcast markets, some growth in sponsorships in the early years of the Glazers, but it got to a point where successive sort of failures, especially in the transfer market, had left United in a difficult position because which will continue for the next few years, which is also why we see some of the decisions being made, which are very unpopular and may or may not be necessary depending on your reading of the situation. So anyway, takeover happens 1 year ago today, and nothing actually happened for a couple of months, right? Until they sort of started announcing some of the executive hires that they were going to make. So I think Barada might have been the first one to be announced.
It's quite early, yeah.
It's quite early, but yeah, with a sort of lead-in gardening leave for a few months, Barada as CEO, and then we got... Eventually Ashworth was announced, or it came out that United were after him. What a joyous occasion and few months that provided us. Yep. And I know, great stuff. So Dave started sleeping at Carrington in order to see what was going on. So Jim visited the IT department and complained about the wires everywhere. All the important stuff. I know, yeah.
Stories that have disappeared from the consciousness that you're bringing back here, Ed.
Well,
Normally my fault.
There are no wires left. They've sold them all off. That's why. So anyway, we got all that slew of executive hires, and that was the first kind of sign of how much the new INEOS team had power and control over the operations at the club. I think beyond what we saw in the sales agreement,
because there was that question, wasn't there? Like, how much control are they going to have for the stake that he's got? And it effectively turned out that he could run whatever you decided to run. Really, there was very little what he wasn't allowed to touch. And I think maybe that's been the case. Ashworth, also a prime example of this, is that you can tell that Ratcliffe has wanted to be very involved as much as possible. And we're still very, I've always said this very early on, from really being able to ascertain whether or not it's a positive direction of travel. but you can see what he's doing there. I mean, I don't know if that's a good thing or bad, but I mean, yeah, he's very, very clear that he is very involved. And I will say one thing, that at least the communication's been there. Not always very popular, but we complained about talking to a brick wall for 10 years, for 15 years, for nearly 20 years. Complained about that. Got the dialogue. Definitely got the dialogue. I don't know. What do you think, Ed? Do you think that's a constructive thing? It's got to be constructive, right? It's more constructive than not having it.
Yeah. In fact, I was quite impressed. Relatively, that's the right word. Relatively impressed with the communication. I mean, so Jim, obviously very comfortable in his own skin. He does a lot of press, not football press, but if you look through the archives, you'll find he's done quite a lot of interviews. Normally fairly serious, FT, Bloomberg, that kind of thing, associated with his other businesses, and he's talked about politics and Brexit and all that kind of stuff. Some stuff that some listeners will be uncomfortable with and some don't care, right? So he's not my politics, but we have all flavors of listeners here, so it'll be some people's politics. And he kind of follows through on that, and he talked quite a lot about what he saw as his vision for the club. I mean, broad strokes, of course, but I think it gave us quite a clear vision straight away. Like, if you remember, he had to sit down, I think it was with Dan Rohn, or was it with the FT? I can't remember which one, where he...
I know.
Yeah, he did the Dan Rohn interview with BBC, where he was just very clear. He said, structure first. We get the right environment for the manager and we'll be successful, and we have to make the transfer market work. Paraphrasing here. And I think he insulted the women's team in that first interview as well, which has become a theme, let's say, of the first year of the takeover. So I thought it was very clear with his communication about what they were doing in the direction of travel. Didn't really signal the cost-cutting element straight away. That came later.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been that. The other thing I always found interesting is that there has been this talk through the various figures that have been appointed about a club style, and we have talked about this. There's been a lot of our dialogue and discourse on this podcast, and I still, probably even more now, as we speak a year on, with everything that's presently happening at the club, I find it more curious because there's an imposition there. There's they know what the club style is. They're telling us what the club style is, and it's very different because it's a diversion away from what the club style has ever been with the new manager, in terms of formation. I mean, holistic things in terms of pressing and ingenuity of play, those things are universal to pretty much any successful football team. There are things that are unique to United. It's still a diversion away from that. So for someone who's, first of all, not an outsider at Ratcliffe, well, let's say that he's a boyhood United fan. I believe that. I buy that. I buy the stories of him watching Besslow and Charlton when they were kids, when he was a kid. But I buy the story that his favourite player was Cantona, all that stuff, as attached as a billionaire could be to a football club. I guess in the same way Abramovich seemed to like Chelsea for a little while. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the best thing for football style. There's been a lot of changes in that regard. Like I say, it's not really the common direction of travel that we're historically renowned for. So it is a move away from that. So that's a big gamble. That's a big gamble because he's now saying, this is it. You've got to like it. And this is what we say is a United style. You've said it a few times on this, as we've talked club style. Club style is for the first time. And he's kind of like welcome to hear that in one sense. But they've got to get that right because...
Yeah. Well, no, absolutely. And I'm not sure that has been followed through on. He said it in his first interview that we'd have a club style. I don't think he called it a play style, although that became a very popular word. Game model, Ten Hag kept saying. So that felt like one that had come from Wilcox Upperada, didn't it? So it's unclear that from the beginning they were like, oh yeah, we want to... Manju plays 3-4-3 in this style that's quite alien to English football. I think I looked at Nice. Lausanne's been a bit of a basket case, but Nice, and they've had a succession of young players and young managers in this, what you might call the Red Bull style, right? Keep the ball, fast transitions, high pressing, high intensity, the athletic, which is you get in younger, cheaper players and you get more bang for your buck. But that's not really Manchester United, is it? We've historically shopped at the top end of the market, or at least in the last 30 years or so,
Yeah.
when the money started pouring in. That wasn't true in the 80s, of course. But so I'm not sure that's really been followed through. It's not like they've done a Chelsea, where Chelsea have, okay, we're going to get a manager. We believe in this style of football, or we believe in the style of football. We're going to find a manager that does that, and then we're going to impose it on all our other group companies.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, as of yet, feel like there is a multi-club ownership group strategy. And in fact, it may be the opposite, that there is some rumours, at least in France, that Nice has been on the market for some time, right? So it's not quite the same, but we didn't get that like holistic group style. It's not clear to me that they were like, yeah, Amorim's man. In fact, they did the opposite. So in the summer, they had this massive review of Ten Hag and Ten Hag's performance, and seemingly spoke to every manager on the planet. They're all flying in to meet Sir Jim on his yacht or something. I think he's got a yacht. Can't remember now. What billionaire doesn't have a yacht? You'd be mocked. You'd be mocked by your friends, wouldn't you?
It's the first thing you buy. It's the first thing you buy.
Two.
Yeah,
Sorry.
exactly. Well, I'm with you on that. And the thing is that there were so many different names that were mentioned with so many contrasting styles. And I do think, not to bang this drum a lot, and we're biased as United fans, but I don't think you can have a multi-club model with United, because United, the pressures of representing United or playing for United or following United are so unique to that club and the profile of that club that it's impossible to replicate it anywhere else. With all the will in the world, I mean this like sincerely, that you can have a system that works anywhere, and there'll be an uncategorized reason for why it will not succeed at United. And I mean, I'm saying this with no foresight, with no prescience. I'm not here saying that the 3-4-3 is going to fail because United have never played a 3-man defense. I'm all for it to try something different. What I mean is, you can't just say that this is the new trend in football and there's a way that we think that this is going to happen at United. You can't, because it works elsewhere, and we can make it work elsewhere, because there are pressures that we know that are so unique to United. I mean, now we know, like Amorim, the pressure's on him already. He's lost a few games in a way that even City don't see, and they've had a disastrous season. Amorim, give him one more defeat and he'll probably be under more pressure than Guardiola already.
Yeah, for sure.
This is the thing about United. And this is, I think, something that they're finding out as well, Ratcliffe. He's a different animal. Like, saying that you have the ego trip of, and I love that part of it, because we talked about this prior to him taking ownership of the club, is that the biggest thing that I was excited about was the fact that the ego element of wanting United to succeed in his lifetime. So he wanted to put United back at the top of the tree, to knock everyone else off the perch, that kind of thing. So that element of it, I still think that he's making those decisions, but I think when there's so much change in so much short space of time, while we're talking about all those different managers, and there was never like a defined, this is what we're looking for, because they look to everyone. There's nothing there that gives you the confidence that says that this is the right direction of travel. And I think that's my biggest concern, because
of course,
you're on the outside with the ego, and then you come in ego flipping heck, that every single decision is public fodder. Every single decision is back page. It doesn't matter. It's the canteen staff, that'll be back page news, especially in the context of you have taken over the club and you are saying there's going to be positive change.
For sure. Look, if Sir Jim buys a $5 billion petrochemicals company in Saudi Arabia or something like that, it will make less news than if he stops the security guard's £50 Christmas bonus.
Exactly.
Right? So, the pressure and the scrutiny is immense. That's also part of the reason why he wants it, not for any kind of, I don't think,
of course,
sports washing element. It's partly his ego, his legacy, isn't it? This is, he could be remembered as a fantastically successful and wealthy businessman with INEOS. He will be remembered with joy and pride and love if he makes Manchester United successful again before he leaves this earth. And boyhood fan or not, it's about legacy rather than money. And I think the decisions that are being made for those reasons maybe very unpopular with supporters, but they're made for those reasons rather than how much blood can we squeeze from the stone, which was the case for the 15 years prior or so. So it doesn't mean I agree with all the decisions or they're not worth scrutiny or criticism, of course. But yeah, I think everything that's been done has been done in that framing. Doesn't mean the impact of cuts or price increases and stuff like that is less. But that's why he's here. And I think he signaled that from the beginning. And they're trying to make decisions for the benefit of the club. Now, I kind of I thought there'd be less change and the seeming chaos than this and I think a lot of it's noise and paper stuff, right? Rather than reality. If you actually dig into how much chaos there really is, there's been a lot of executive management change, a lot of change in operations and a lot of painful change in operations as well. But probably if you look at Nice, I thought they might have sort of taken a lot of learnings, but it's just such a different beast. United are, 10 times more popular or 100 times more popular around the world and have 10 times the revenue. And it's been a bit of a learning curve maybe. And Sir Jim has seemingly been more hands-on than we expected, or he actually says he is, because what he says in public and what seems to be the case behind the scenes are slightly different. But yeah, so I thought we'd get onto a few of the issues. Some of them sort of controversial, some of them not so much. So we had some summer spending and we didn't have Ashworth in place, but we did have Wilcox in place. And I don't know how much Ashworth and Barada, who were both on gardening leave, had involvement in the summer transfer market or not. Strictly speaking, they said not, just to make sure they complied.
No one wants responsibility for it, do they, really?
Well, that is interesting. Apparently that irked Sir Jim. I don't know if that's true or not. It was just one of the reports with Ashworth that it irked him that he had actually literally said it wasn't me, Gov. But I think that was to do with the gardening leave agreements. So we had 5 players come in. He's been all right. Musa Mazraoui, I think he's been a massive success. Fair to say. Josh Xerxes, who we're still yet to see the best of. Maybe more to come. We hope there's more to come. Right?
That's polite. I think that's very polite.
That is polite, yeah. It's been maybe one good game in 18, but Serie A Young Player of the Year, got to have something about him. Manuel Ugarte, who came in late, but has been a big hit, I would say. So mostly a successful summer transfer window. And I think I was saying on yesterday's pod, it probably needs to be like this, an 80% success rate going forward for United to turn it around, because it's probably been a 10% success rate. That might even be generous for the previous 10 years or so in the transfer market.
Yeah, I'm thinking, 10% is probably generous. I mean, you've got to also think, all right, with speaking, by the way, in the context of, I think week by week, this looks different. I don't think we're definitely not massively reactionary, but I still think that your general mood is still influenced by what just happened. And if we were speaking a day after the City win, I think things still felt a little bit rosier. Now, after the Bournemouth defeat, I look at it and I think we're still miles away. I feel like we're much further away than what I obviously did 7 days earlier. And I think that's the peaks and troughs of any football fan anyway. But I think 10% feels like it's generous, because what you're actually saying is the standard of footballer required to win a league title at Manchester United. That's what we want. So if you're basing it on that standard, then 0% would be successful because nobody's done it. Or maybe 5%, where you would say the one player like a Brian Robson, David De Gea, who deserved more than what he got in that period of time. The standard wasn't matched by his teammates. And I just don't think there's been that many of them. And I know that that's harsh. I know that because, again, we're talking about the microscope of Manchester United and how it affects players differently. But they've still been moderately successful. They've won trophies. So in the context of the rest of football, United aren't far away from. Liverpool have won more trophies. Obviously, I'm taking Manchester City aside. Liverpool have won more trophies, but I think Chelsea might have won more since Fergie retired, but United will be third. So I think, considering the underachievement, that's not terrible. They've won more than Arsenal. They've won more than any other club. So, but then there's the element of it's a weak league, generally speaking. There's just one peacock at the top of that league. Yeah, all right, there are different challenges. A league will always have a nearest challenger, but we've seen the high points totals and everything that's represented. The fact that it's not a strong league at the moment. So there's the element of like United just have not been able to get that right when the league has been not there for the taking. But I look back to Leicester winning the league and like not sacking Van Gaal before Christmas when Mourinho was available. I'm not saying Mourinho would have been it. It was always going to be the dumpster fire that it turned out to be. But there was an opportunity there. And we've always been too late, too ponderous with big decisions and too... Is it erratic, too unfair, do you think, when I'm saying the transfer policy? It never seemed like it was...
For the past 15 years, yeah, completely erratic. Yeah, or past 12, let's say, since Fergie did.
Yeah,
left.
It never felt like it... What I mean is it never felt like it was part of a puzzle coming together. You never felt like these players are going together for this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
One area of the team to the next. You never said, these defenders will play together, this midfield will play together. You know what I mean? In terms of like the individual qualities, you always thought, well, that's a good player on his quality, but how's he going to work with a Pogba? That defender's good, but he's going to have to be compensating for Maguire, or, you know, that defender's a good right back, but he can't contribute anything else. All those kind of things.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly why Ashworth was an important appointment, right? Like, for whether it's the right one is questionable now. But that's what you want from a sporting director. You want like kind of holistic vision of squad building. Yeah. And that includes transfers out, transfers in, contract renewals and so on. And all of that has been wrong for the last 12 years. We've handed new contracts to the wrong players at the wrong figures. And it's still painful now. Yeah, if you think about like when you have to engineer an exit of a failed player like Jadon Sancho, right? It costs a massive amount of money. And you know, I've done that over and over again, and it's part of the reason why we're in such financial pain. So they have to get that right. So Jim knows this. We were talking about his communication. He said that right in the beginning, said the right things about the structure and the appointments there. Didn't work out with Ashworth, but they at least have a vision for what they kind of want. Now, whether they make the right kind of decisions is like to play out. I don't think a year is actually long enough to judge that. Wanted to talk before we close out about some of the controversial things, like, I mean, it's not like none of this is not public, right? You know, 250 people lost their jobs at United, has had an impact on morale around the place, quite an impact. So I hear from several people who I DM'd about it. It's like, it's awful for the people who've lost their jobs, and in some cases been at United for a long time. Right. And morale is such that there was even a story today that apparently one operations director at a rival Northwest club has got several CVs on his or her desk from United employees looking for an exit. So, like, I mean, I've been in a place where there's been a lot of cuts very quickly. And there's an awful amount of shock and pain. And then the organization starts to heal itself. So I suspect that will happen with United over time. And that sounds really cynical, but people just get on with their lives and what they're trying to do. And this was part of I don't know whether this is the medicine United have to take or not. I mean, it's a part of an attempt to rectify the financial situation by removing £45 million worth of costs.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, I think the thing is with that, we're still in that process. And I feel like there's a lot of thinking that we would be much further down the road in that process. Do you know what I mean? And it's still like this ambiguous sort of muddle of like, what's the direction? What are these areas? So much of it feels like it's governed by the morale of what's happening on the football pitch.
Absolutely.
But it's also not, because like you said, there are a lot of good people there, like a lot of people who I knew who were there who were incredibly talented in the areas in which they worked, and so far those areas haven't been replaced, and it's unclear about that direction. There's always that kind of idea that is further down the road, there's something coming, so you do have to trust in that. And like you said, there is always that element whenever there's a takeover, whenever there's talk of streamlining and cost cutting, there's always a buy, and it's always really rotten. You can't avoid that. I'm not saying it's necessary. I'm not saying it's unnecessary. I'm just saying it's usually inevitable. And I think there's just that element of wanting the squeeze to be gone, to see that light at the end of the tunnel. It might have felt better if there were more positive results on the pitch, but I still don't think so. I still feel like, because there are a lot of people who were working there, and it doesn't feel like it when you look at the numbers, but they're not numbers, they're people, and the people who worked in every different area of the football club. And when there is that much change, it takes a long time to sort of steer in a different direction. I think there are other things as well that are like I know you want to talk about the women's team, which is a massive thing within the club as well. You know what I mean? It's such a big part of the club now, and it's such a big part of the future that some of the comments sometimes appear to be tone deaf. Not necessarily because, I mean, we all understand the sort of like the women's. It's an ongoing conversation in football. And I saw really good. I wish I could remember right now the person. It might have been. No, I'm not going to say the name because I'll probably get it wrong. But someone talked about the progress of women's football, and how it might have done much better if it had men's football standing on it for 50 years. And I love that description of it, because that's right. That is what happened. Now, will there be reparations? Is that what we're looking at? Well, this is an issue for the sport as a whole, but women's football will accelerate. It will have financial growth because there's an exponential avenue in there.
There's demand.
Yeah, exactly. And all right, it doesn't have the crowds, it doesn't have the financial power just yet, but that will happen. And United have to be there when that happens. They cannot afford. What I'm saying with this is that they are well equipped, financially well equipped to be at the forefront of everything to do with women's football right now. They can do that right now. So there's no excuse for why that shouldn't be happening.
I've talked previously about how little money it actually takes to accelerate that growth. So United's women's is not a loss leader at all, right? It is financially stable on its own. And despite Sir Jim saying one of his tone-deaf things was that it costs United £10 million a year, it actually doesn't. You can see in the accounts exactly what it is, but it wouldn't take very much, a few £1 million to kind of accelerate the growth of that club. And when the new TV contract for the Women's Super League is a really big step, the one after that, if we look at the growth path, should be even bigger, because there's lots and lots of demand out there. We see great crowds in the NWSL in the States. We've seen at Arsenal 60,000 crowds filling the Emirates. We've seen at Barcelona 100,000 people go see the women's team. This is just to say there's a real opportunity. Now, United women in the overall state of the game are still quite young, right? 6-7 seasons now.
Yep.
Crowds have capped off at sort of 4,000 at Leeds Sports Village. It's not the ideal venue by any means. It's some way out of town, and people have to take buses there and are really committed to doing it and all that kind of stuff. And that has kind of, I think, restricted the growth. They played a few games at Old Trafford. The crowds have been disappointing, honestly, compared to some of the other clubs, but there is an opportunity there. And I think the disappointing thing is it's clearly not a focus. Now, down the line, when they feel like they fixed the men's team, and I hate this division because it's just one club, right? We wouldn't talk about the academy in the same way, right? If we said things like, "Oh, no, we're going to think about the academy later, we're just going to leave that for now," that would create howls of derision, and it hasn't done in quite the same way for the women's team, which is a shame, right? And whenever we talk about women's football on this podcast, the numbers drop. That's a real shame as well, right? I think we're on a growth path, but there are peaks and troughs, and there's still a lot of cynicism and misogyny about women's football. And unfortunately, some of the stuff that's been said by the new ownership group kind of sounds like that. Like, it's not important. And it would be a real shame if they don't think about it in serious terms.
You talk about peaks and troughs. Like, first of all, that's a natural thing anyway. Like, over a lifespan of anything, there'll be that. But I think you can definitely track that with the massive turnover in playing squad. I mean, United, like you said there, fledgling squad. It was really in its infancy. They've had 3 of the country's most high-profile players of a generation in Russo, Toon, and Earps. 3 massively marketable assets there. 2 of them have just been allowed to walk away from the club. And they would have loved to have stayed at United. There was no, if everything was right in terms of the infrastructure. And I'm not saying anything there's nothing there that's controversial, because we've all seen that happen. So what I'm saying is, like, if you are witnessing that, what the point I'm trying to relate this to is the fact that you're saying there's peaks and troughs and the attendances have tailed off. Well, that may be the case, but that's because of that erratic kind of attitude to that, and the fact that those players have. Because why would you invest all your time and your money in going to support a team when you don't know there's no journey there? Like, say, it's like American football. Their old soccer teams, in the way that they would just trade in the off season, everyone would get traded. You wouldn't, or the franchise itself would move to a different state. You wouldn't know what you were following, so there's no reason to be invested in it. And that's where the analysis of anything with the United women's team falls apart, because you can look at that and say, oh, well, it's tailed off. So you might then say it's a loss leader. There's no interest in that. But there are all these kind of different circumstances that lead into that. And yeah, it is a shame. I'm speaking as someone who doesn't go to games. I watch the odd one. I don't go to the game, so I can't speak there as like an advocate and say that I'm a ready convert. I will be in the future. It will be something that I will gravitate towards. And, in time, it's just going to be one of those things that my interest picks up week by week organically. And I think that's the same for many people as well. And it might be a case of like being glory hunters when, United gets a lot of rounds of competitions and stuff. But just like a natural organic thing where the interest, your interest gravitates from the men's team because you've got that focus. We talk about it. I research it. I'm writing about it all the time. So my focus is always there. But naturally, you go there. What I'm trying to say is that you have to help it. It can be organic, but if you are standing on its neck, and that's what we've done, unfortunately. Then you cannot expect there to be any progress.
Well, in general terms, of course, the FA banned women's football for decades. So there's in terms of like the financial, commercial, and interest development of the game, it's some way behind, and that is the fault of the FA for literally trying to restrict the interest. I mean, if you think around the time of the Second World War, there are huge crowds going to women's football. Huge, massive, right?
So I was reading that. I saw that earlier. It's talking like crowds of 50,000. And I do remember reading about that some time ago and thinking, because like the point was that you were checking demographics to see who were going to matches after the war, and there were lots of women going. There was this fallacy that women didn't go to football matches, which kind of drowned. It became the case in the 70s because of the hooliganism, but really in the 40s and 50s, there were massive crowds of women at football matches. You can see that on all the Pathé News footage you saw there.
Absolutely. So look, I mean, that's to say there is a big opportunity here. It would be, I think, a mistake to not help the development of the women's team, and it doesn't take much money. There's an opportunity to break into the sort of big three of women's football. Chelsea are obviously the dominant club side for the last few years. Arsenal, who were before that, and City, who have also been successful, and there's an opportunity to break into that and to get more European football. In Champions League, there's an expanded Europa League, the women's version of the Europa League as well, going to happen in a couple of years' time, I think. So opportunity there. It doesn't take much in order to do it. I mean, it really only takes a general manager. Obviously, Polly Bancroft left to go and take over as CEO of Grimsby. I think there's a general thought in the game that she's a very smart operator, and that has been a loss for United, and she wasn't replaced. And then there's a lot of frustration with the manager and the turnover and playing staff and stuff like that. So opportunities there. Unfortunately, it hasn't been the focus to date. Moving on, there's been a lot of talk about stadium as well. And there was a task force appointed, Seb Coe, IOC chair and former Olympian and Tory MP and all of that. As chair of that committee, Gary Neville is on that committee, so is Andy Burnham and representatives of Manchester Council and so on. And the idea is to assess what the best path is for the future of Old Trafford. And it could be to renovate and repair and restructure Old Trafford as it is, or move to a brand new stadium. And it appears to be the favourite choice, although they promised to publish this by the end of the year, Wayne. So we may be getting something in next week, their chosen path forward. And it's still years away because of planning permission and moving the freight terminal and financing and building new stadium and so on. So years away from anything happening, but it appears to be that direction of travel is a brand new stadium. Sorry, you were going to say?
No. Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's a financing thing that's the thing for me. But it's all very well talking about and projecting a new stadium, but when there are staff cuts and you're wondering where that money's going to come from, do you know what I mean? I understand that once that financing is in place, that development will happen very quickly. We've already talked ad nauseum about the pros and cons between it. I'm still, there's a part of me that's the traditionalist who still loves Old Trafford, and so every now and again when I go to a game, I'm kind of like, I'll hate to see this go, but then when I'm not there and I'm reading and like putting my United historian hat on and saying, well, that's what we've done in the past. I think it's more to do with the fact that when we did that in the past, there wasn't a lot of history there, and so like we were moving quite rapidly from the stadium. So the things that I tell myself to say is part of our history to move when we outgrow is, it's all right saying that, but that's over 120 years ago, 115 years ago. So it's not part of our modern history, and everything of our modern history is contained within the four walls of that stadium. All right, it's been knocked down.
The walls have changed.
Yeah,
yes.
Numerous times. The tunnels moved around and stuff like that, but it's still the same thing. And I feel like when I'm having that inner battle, the turmoil of like, oh, I don't know what I prefer, really it's out of my hands. So I don't need to sort of gravitate myself with a moral fiber of that. But the second thing is, it's so far away that it's not a reality yet. It's just a concept, and we're still talking about it. And I think until we see the plans, until like say, if there's something within the next week that says this is what we want to do and this is when we're going to do it by, then all right, I might start to feel differently. But until then, I've kind of like stepped back and said, well, the reality of this, considering the reality of this situation, you reeled those numbers off earlier and how the financial constraints are. I mean, I don't think people really appreciate the restriction that transfer debt and the actual debt and the loans over the next 2 or 3 years, the impact that's going to have on the club. I've got some idea, but I think people don't really appreciate that, and they won't appreciate it until that next 2 or 3 years happens.
It's 2.5 years. Within that 2.5 years, United owe £331 million to other clubs. No, actually, not all of that is due. Most of that is due in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
Most of that is due. And 537 million net. The gross is even bigger than that, 590 something. We don't have much cash in hand at the moment as a club in those senior notes. Now, they can be refinanced and may well be. Part of the future, and it's tied up with the stadium, of course, part of the future of United is like what the ownership looks like. There's a kind of exclusivity period for the 3 years. There's a lockout period for 18 months in which there's no more trading. And the exclusivity period, I think, for 3 years in which INEOS have this named price in which they can basically purchase more shares, or they have right of first refusal on more shares and a named price, right? So that signals to everybody that a full takeover will happen at some point. Doesn't mean doesn't guarantee it. Absolutely doesn't. And the onus is really on the Glazer family, whether they want to fully sell or not, because there's one theory that INEOS come in, make it all really successful, and the asset is worth way more, and they decide to sell someone else or keep it for themselves, and that could happen. It seems unlikely, and that's based both on the contract and the sales agreement and the trust that Sir Jim appears to have with the Glazer family itself. So, but that is all tied up with like refinancing that debt, or in theory, it could be fully paid off if Sir Jim takes over. It's not going to happen before then, because why would you pay off someone else's debt? Makes no sense. And then financing of a new stadium, which is going to be a £2 billion project. That in INEOS terms is quite small, right? They have built mega factories and refinery plants that are much bigger than that. And so they actually know how to finance large-scale construction projects. And it's funny, much more experience with that than with running a football team, actually. That goes alongside regeneration of the area as well. There's been an ongoing conversation about what tax breaks there might be, or potentially public funding, not for the stadium, but for the surrounding area, and especially for that freight terminal to move it nearer to Liverpool, because that land would then be used for the footprint of the new stadium. On the Old Trafford area, just 100 yards a bit further west. So they're all tied together, refinancing, debt, future takeover and stadium. And I kind of, if you were asking me to predict from here, I think there will be a full takeover and that debt will be refinanced. I don't necessarily think it will be paid off in full out of Sir Jim's pocket, but it could be, but seems unlikely. I mean, like most large scale companies run with debt and it's not that expensive. And then some kind of refinancing for the new stadium, which basically pays for itself with new revenue. At least we've seen with Tottenham, it's paid for itself. Arsenal had a really restricting impact on them because they under-commercialised it, actually, compared to what Spurs have done. So we'll see. That it kind of looks that you could paint a picture of a full takeover, a turnaround of the team. We have Project 150, if you remember, which is we're going to win the league by the 150th anniversary of United, which is in 2028. Looks, for where we are today, it looks ambitious. We'll have way more clarity on the stadium, maybe quite soon, actually. And then a full takeover happens within a 3-year window, I think, within the next 2 years. So by the end of 2027, especially when those senior notes have to be refinanced or paid off, then we're going to have real clarity about the future ownership of United.
There you
go. Exciting stuff. Yeah. Or there could be more drama.
At United? Never.
No, never. Wow. It's been wild ride for a year, Wayne. So, with tongue in cheek, I put my INEOS sponsored niche shirt on for this video. Tongue firmly in cheek. If you're on the podcast, of which there are many more of you than actually watched this, you'll be like, what's he talking about? Because you can't see it, but if you go onto YouTube, I have my OGC Nice away kit on, which is very, very nice, actually. So,
it's very nice.
yeah,
there we go.
It is.
Sorry. Bad Christmas cracker joke for you there.
Merry Christmas, everyone, for those of you who celebrate, or Hanukkah, for those of you who celebrate that, or Winter Festival and Solstice, for those of you who are pagans like me, or just enjoy the break from work and be merry and come on, United, win some games. This makes it all feel better, I think. All right. Thanks very much, everyone, for watching or listening. That was a quick run through, well, not that quick run through of the past year of INEOS ownership. Some peaks, quite a lot of troughs, quite a lot of change and drama, and we're going to see more to come. Bye now.